So, Mr. Panzironi, today we are talking about a rather common female problem, of course, and that is menorrhagia. So, to make people understand what this phenomenon is, which is basically very heavy menstrual flow, we have this video. Let's see it.
Profuse menstrual flow is a widely spread problem, although certainly underestimated, in fact in many cases even misrecognized. What does profuse menstrual flow mean? A heavy menstrual flow is a flow in which the amount of blood lost with each menstrual event is excessive, that is, it is higher than normal. The problem is that the woman is often self-referential, that is, she is not able to compare the amount of blood she loses with the amount of blood other women lose, and therefore she thinks it is normal what she has been losing all along from the time of her first menstruation. Actually, there is a way that, although it is not strictly precise, strictly objective, let's say scientific, it is, however, sufficiently indicative, and it is a method that we call semi-quantitative. It involves counting the number of pads a woman uses during a usual menstrual flow, but also assessing how much is soaked of blood from each individual pad.
So, Mr. Panzironi, this was Dr. Francesco Maria Primiero, and he explained to us basically how to recognize a woman who has the problem of very heavy menstruation, and very often it is also difficult to self-diagnose it.
Well, the professor is right, because unfortunately it is a condition, a totally widespread problem that women who suffer from it suffer from the very first menstruation. So they rightly feel that it is normal to have this flow, this amount of bleeding. And then also going to compare with other women does not help them, because precisely it is so present in the female population that it has really now almost become the norm for all women.
That is, so you're telling us that it's so widespread, this issue, that you can't tell when the flow is really profuse or it's normal.
Well, look, consider that menorrhagia is considered in 14% of women as precisely prevalence. However, even 52% of women, however, know and think that they have a problem of excessive bleeding, and even it is an extremely simple and biological phenomenon, especially since only 50% of that 14% is, let's say, so caused by endometrial changes, such as could be endometriosis or fibroids. The rest becomes just a biological aspect that therefore is very often underestimated.
So, Mr. Panzironi, if you agree, I would start from the beginning, basically. Let's go and understand what menstruation is, and we do that with this video.
Menstruation is really menstrual blood. It is endometrium. It is the inner mucous membrane of the uterus that, in order to prepare itself to receive the embryo and obviously then to guard it for 9 months, this preparation that consists first of all of a growth, an initial proliferative phase, then consists of a preparation of elements that are vital for the survival and maintenance of the embryo. This preparation obviously ceases to exist when the pregnancy does not begin. Then messages come in, hormonal signals on the endometrium that this endometrium is not needed for this month, and so it is eliminated. The physiological fact of menstruation can bring pain. It is just the physiology that brings pain. It is strange that something physiological brings pain. However, it is not strange in medicine.
Here, Panzironi, this was Dr. Rubens Fadini, who explained to us practically what menstruation is. So let's clarify, it's a normal biological process of the woman practically preparing herself to get pregnant.
Yes, as the doctor explained very well in the video, it's endometrial tissue that basically grows, and then once conception doesn't happen, it's eliminated and then expelled with blood.
Look, though, always Professor Fadini also told us another thing, talking about the pain induced by menstruation. He told us exactly that. It is strange that a physiological thing brings pain, but it is not for medicine.
I think this statement makes it very clear what is the approach of official medicine towards diseases, and obviously also in their treatment. The doctor wonders if it is normal to suffer from something physiological. However, he then states that it is normal for medicine. Well, physiological things do not have to be painful. If we ever have this problem, medicine should ask itself why there is this problem and should find a way to solve it.
Panzironi, you talked about approach. Then I would like to see this video where they talk about just the approach of medicine towards this kind of pathology. Let's see it together.
So women with abundant menstruation, they can make use of a contraceptive pill, always of these low dose, so that they don't have a big impact on the metabolism, on the physique of the woman, and that as characteristics have this reduction of the flow, so of the iron loss, of the blood loss. The second option we have for these women with these menstrual characteristics is the insertion of an intrauterine device that disperses a very effective progestin. Another possibility is the much more traditional use of progestin in the second half of the month, from the 14th to the 24th, which reduces the growth of the endometrium and reducing the menstrual flow.
And that was Professor Luigi Fedele. So he basically told us about contraceptive drugs or devices that release progesterone. What do you think?
I think we're back to the same old thing, because if the official medicine, the protocol medicine, has understood that there is a hormonal disruption, how do you fix it? Simply by administering more hormones that somehow try to rebalance this lost thing. It's actually a wrong approach. Even you go and administer NSAID drugs that prevent excessive inflammation, and we know that in situations of inflammation, especially localized inflammation, it's important precisely to allow that tissue to detach and then to cause precisely menstruation to end. Medicine, as usual, is only concerned with the administration of drugs and absolutely not concerned with understanding the reasons that induce those changes.
Look, Panzironi, you made a video with our editorial staff just to explain what happens during the menstrual cycle. And then in case of menorrhagia, I would say let's watch it together.
At the end of the luteal phase, the production of estradiol and progesterone is drastically reduced, and this results in menstruation through three pathways: production of prostaglandins by glandular cells, production of endothelin I by stromal cells, which together with glandular and epithelial cells release metalloprotease. Prostaglandins and endothelin I induce vasoconstriction and ischemia of endometrial tissue. Metalloproteases digest endometrial tissue, inducing flaking and thus producing menstruation. In the case of menorrhagia, there is an overgrowth of progesterone and estradiol that induces an overgrowth of the endometrium and an alteration of the ischemia phase of the tissue, in fact the alteration of angiopoietins, and in particular a reduction in angiopoietin 1 and an increase in angiopoietin 2 causes a reduction in angiogenesis and an increase in microcirculation degradation, thus causing bleeding. Angiopoietin 2 is produced by Th2 class immune cells, while angiopoietin 1 is produced via testosterone stimulation.
Here the video was, as usual, very explanatory. We understood that excess estradiol plays a very important role, which we remember comes from testosterone and then is transformed by the enzyme aromatase.
Yes, estradiol allows the growth precisely of the surface of the endometrium in the first 14 days of the cycle, and so an excess of this hormone also leads to an excess of the size of this surface.
Then also in the video they were talking about the role of angiopoietins. Exactly, angiopoietin 1 and angiopoietin 2. The first one decreases and the other one increases.
Yes, they are two very important elements just for vessel reconstruction. Angiopoietin I allows the reconstruction that normally happens when precisely the endometrium has to be eliminated, and angiopoietin 2, on the other hand, induces its inhibition. So the right ratio between the two allows there to then be the ischemic phase that is needed to stop the bleeding after the cycle.
So basically, we're talking about an alteration of a very delicate tissue. But what does this depend on?
It depends, of course, on the diet we eat. Again, these sugar-rich foods like bread, pasta, pizza, potatoes, rice, and legumes that are provided in our normal Mediterranean diet are the direct culprits precisely for the occurrence of this menorrhagia. And we talked about estradiol example, and well, we know that estradiol is transformed, so testosterone is transformed into estradiol through aromatase, and the insulin that we activate whenever we eat foods rich in sugar go to stimulate in the adipocyte cells the aromatase and therefore the transformation of estradiol. And this leads, on the one hand, as we said, an excess of this hormone that precisely induces an overgrowth of the endometrium. On the other hand, we have a major reduction in testosterone. And, well, testosterone is needed precisely to stimulate angiopoietin-1, so vessel reconstruction. Then we have explained very often that when we eat these carbohydrate-rich foods, we go to alter our immune system called Th2, and therefore we go to imbalance it, and this leads to inflammation of the endometrial tissue, and this causes an overstimulation of precisely angiopoietin-2, and therefore prevents the reconstruction of the vessels, and therefore the subsequent ischemia and blockage of bleeding.
Precise and straightforward, thank you. Now, usually in the final part of the focus, we have a guest, a witness who comes and talks to us about the very issue that we have been dealing with, obviously, in the focus, just to tell us that with the Life 120 lifestyle, you can heal from these issues, these pathologies. So I would say we call here in our studio from Rome, Barbara Ferretti. Good evening and welcome. Thank you. Have a seat. So I first of all thank you, because this evening we are also going to talk about very personal, very intimate things. So you are already here talking about it, and I already thank you for that. But we have to talk about it, and I ask you right away, because you were telling me earlier that the first time you got your period was a trauma for you.
Yes, because the period, I had it in the 5th grade. It was immediately abundant, and I always had the attention because of the fear, as it then happened, maybe to soil, to stain for a little girl. In short, it was kind of embarrassing.
I know that something happened to you just the first time.
Yeah. It was at school, and I wouldn't get up from the little seat because I was embarrassed to get up for that, and so I waited for the teacher to then come to me.
So then, besides this first phenomenon, all your life you suffered from menorrhagia?
Yes, my whole life I had irregular periods, and so much so that I didn't even keep count. I didn't even know the exact days. It was always like that, sometimes skipping even. 6 months, once the most striking, and when it came, it was then very, very plentiful, always from the first day to the last day.
Yes. Look, we heard just earlier in the focus that official medicine assesses the occurrence of this problem based on the tampons used. Have to ask you, how many tampons did you use?
Always 2 at a time, always.
And during the day, did he have to change them often? Every hour you had to change your tampon. You used 2 at a time because you were afraid of getting dirty.
And then because it was always plenty anyway, it was unpredictable what could happen.
So it didn't go away during the week, it was always very strong. Did you have any other complaints? I don't know, pains during?
I had very strong pains the first day especially, and then they would prolong in the days to follow. Pains that it was not only the belly that was involved, but also the legs, like bites right on the legs.
Look, I know that then you had also been given medication.
Trenex, for example, the doctor had given me because it was to stop the bleeding, because it was real bleeding. He was able to, with that a little bit, I would dab. However, of course, when the effect was over, then it would start over again, so I would have to take the drug again and again to go up.
Then you started following the Life 120 lifestyle. When did that happen? Do you remember the date exactly?
The 1st of August, because we went on vacation and decided, thanks to the oldest son in the house, curious, he had been looking for some new lifestyle. He was looking for himself. So we followed it from the 1st of August, and let's say from the next month, I was already amazed because I had no pains. To see the period come without any pains for me was a special thing.
And here, then I know at one point you saw it coming more and more. How come?
I used to see it coming too early for how I was used to it, because then I started to keep a little better track of it, and I realized that it was splitting days just every 28 days. So it's also...
now it's regular.
Now it's regular, and also the flows.
Here, by the way, she was on the clap, was also specifying the flow, about the flow. Now the flow, how is it?
Normal, let's say. By normal, I also mean with the comparison of other friends, colleagues, women, what is normal. It certainly wasn't what I had before.
So I ask you the question, how many tampons do you change now?
Now, a morning's work, maybe maximum a couple of times. Just maximum.
But she also told us about the fact that throughout the duration, the flow was always very heavy and did not decrease. Now, however, how it is?
Yes, now it is at the beginning a little bit more, and then it always goes down until the end of the days, in short.
So there is a descent, there is a decrease. One last question. Because you told us that she had very severe pains, such that you were telling me that on the first day you couldn't even go to work. So you were skipping even the work day or all the activities that normally a woman does. And she really does hundreds of them a day. I know you had these very severe pains that gripped her, especially her legs. Now, what kind of discomfort do you experience during your period?
Now, just barely, when it comes a little, just hint that it's coming, and that's it. You can't say it's pains.
Obviously, you mentioned earlier about a medication. Obviously, the medication...
I don't take it anymore. No, absolutely perfect.
I thank you.